Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Breer, and welcome to episode 59 of the 11FS FinTech Insider Breakfast Show. In this show, we bring you the best and the brightest from around the fintech and banking landscape every single morning, straight into your homes at 8:30 BST, here live on LinkedIn. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Bailey Kursar, who is co-founder and CEO of Touco. Do you know what? I nearly got that wrong, Bailey. I'm used to saying something different to it, but we'll get on to that very shortly. On this morning's show, what we're going to be talking about is Touco's rebranding, the company's ethos, and their new care card. Good morning, Bailey. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing really well. It's Monday morning.
Do you know what? I really struggled this morning, I have to say, to get out of bed. But how's things going with you? I mean, a name change, which we'll come on to in a second. But before we get into it, your background's, I've always said this, if anybody's seen Bailey when we've had her on air before, your background's amazing. Could you, for anybody who doesn't know you, give you a bit of an overview?
Well, that's very flattering. I wouldn't necessarily say that. A lot of people I talk to say I've been around a bit, which is very true. So I've been in fintech for about 9 years now, and started off really as a dog's body in a very early stage startup that grew up to be funding options, and loved it. Just fell into it. Never really thought about financial services before that. And then I've been in product and marketing roles at primarily Market Invoice, now Market Finance. So you can talk a bit about that rebranding. And then Monzo, again, part of that. That was fun. And then I've done various kind of consulting contracts, which was good, including Zopa. So yeah, really love the industry as a whole, and I've had a taste of lots of different areas. I'm the ultimate generalist, I think. So that's me.
Well, it's pretty, very impressive list of organizations, and obviously all organizations that, I mean, very culture-led companies in terms of where they're at. The Market Invoice, the Monzo. I think all of these companies do share some themes in them in terms of where they're at. And not that I'm trying to sort of piece it together for you. I always find strategy on CV retrospectively makes a lot more sense, doesn't it, rather than trying to do it at the time. But
yeah, definitely. And I think you're totally right, but I think I have always lived by the maxim of do the thing that's most interesting at the time, and the thing that really calls to you, hopefully calls to you. Even when I was doing contract work, I was doing things that I thought were really interesting. And similarly, now with Touco, I'm doing something that I find really, really interesting, and it's actually quite challenging. So it keeps you on your toes, right? So I think that's the thing that's really got the thread through all of those things. I had been in a small business running their financial team, kind of doing cash flow forecasting and invoicing and stuff before I got into fintech. So getting into small business finance with funding options and Market Invoice really made sense. And then Monzo was just such an amazing vision, even at that early stage, that especially if you're in fintech and you're passionate about it, I was just like, I really want to be a part of this in any small way that I can be. And then similarly, other startups that I've been involved in, we're all on this big journey together. I feel like it's a movement. So I'm excited to just be a part of that.
Yeah, I think people who are not part of the London sort of community, I think it particularly is in London, I think don't quite get that. But there is a lot of camaraderie between organizations. There is a lot of, as you say, a kind of a collective of a movement of people really trying to change the industry, which is good, right? It keeps everybody having that high bar, doesn't it? But I mean, it's starting to feel a little bit like This Is Your Life rather than the morning show. So I'm going to move it on a little bit. But
let's get past that.
I did. Yeah, I was going to bring out your junior school teacher, and it was going to be a whole thing. But we'll scrap that for now. So, but for anybody who doesn't know, can you tell us a little bit of background about Touco?
Of course I can. So at Touco, our whole mission is about helping carers and the people that they care for collaborate better when it comes to managing finances. The reason being is there are lots of people who are vulnerable for lots of different reasons, disability, impairments, and they struggle to manage their finances in the same way that a lot of other people do. And And actually what they want is support from someone that they trust, a partner, a parent, a sibling, someone in their family, or it could be a professional carer as well. And the tools to do that just don't exist. So we are building the technology to make sure that is safe, and also that there is enough of a voice from the person who is vulnerable so that they feel like they're not losing their independence and dignity. So it's a really important thing for us that we feel it day to day when we speak to the people we're trying to help. And caring is a very important and hot topic with COVID-19. It was Carers Week last week, so that was kind of why we timed some of our announcements as well. So the product itself at the moment relies on open banking to share someone's financial life with their carer. But we're now building a care card, a similar product in some ways to the connected card from Starling, but the difference is it's kind of a longer term solution. So one where a kind of permanent carer on site will be able to have much more flexibility over the kinds of things that they can pay for on behalf of the person they're caring for. So yeah, that's us at Touco.
It's a big mission. I mean, and as you say, there's a large number of people who really need this type of product as well, because it's a very underserved market, isn't it?
Did you know there are 13.6 million unpaid carers in the country at the moment? That's 1 in 4 adults.
I did not know that. No, but that reinforces my point. There's a big market there for something in this space. And actually, as you say, the features and functionality that, it's not just as simple as giving access to some money, isn't it? The controls and care around this it goes a lot broader, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The real opportunity here is that before Touco, your options as a carer really were to get full access with a power of attorney, and that might be using some kind of risky workaround kind of thing rather than a really nicely designed digital tool. So a lot of carers we speak to spend their time on the phone doing telephone banking because they don't really have any other choice. But even in that scenario, you've kind of just got the keys to the kingdom. You can't have any in-between land. And really what that does is it forces a kind of power dynamic on that relationship between a carer and the person they're caring for that most of the time people don't want to have. It definitely makes sense towards the last moments of someone's needs when they've really lost mental capacity. But a lot of the time people end up in difficult situations because they don't put the power of attorney in place. It's a kind of big heavy-handed solution. So what we can do is give them kind of a variety of things before they need to get to that type of solution. And yeah, it's that flexibility that we really care about at Touco.
Yeah. Well, as you say, the scenarios end up where your own personal finances are managed in one way, but the person you're caring for, you end up 3 hours on the phone trying to deal with something basic, don't you? And it's a very difficult situation, I imagine, for many families, because carers are one thing, but actually the controls and the trust that you would have to have on that person to give them power of attorney and full access of controls. It is a real minefield, isn't it, in terms of the impact on those things. And obviously this is probably coming at a time where people are under a lot of mental stress given the situation as well. So it's a great thing to do. It's like I say, another organization with a very strong mission. So well done. How's things going in terms of the organization?
Yeah, there are 7 of us now, and we have been very busy building our new version of the product, which is going to be coming out in the next week, I think. So that's exciting. And as I mentioned before, we've just announced that we're going to be building a care card. We were really fortunate to have got some funding from Innovate UK, from their COVID-19 response fund. It's a product that we knew we wanted to build. It was just something we wanted to do after a fundraise, because the costs associated with, as you know, putting a card product together are pretty high. But we were lucky to kind of get that grant, which means we can take away some of that risk, put the product into people's hands sooner, and really test whether or not the things that we think are going to help the carers that we speak to actually make a difference in their day-to-day life. So that's going to be our focus for the next few months. And in Q3, Q4, we'll be coming out with kind of the first versions of that product. But yeah, having 7 people, we were talking about it before we started. It's a really great time. Like, I've been involved in startups at a similar stage, and you're kind of all sharing bits of information all the time, and it's almost like you're all on the same wavelength. So we're trying to replicate that as much as possible, doing remote working.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. I've said a few times on this show before, but when we were starting 11FS, we were all completely remote. And as you say, the things you do to over communicate to make sure that actually you're all collectively going in the same direction is interesting. But, you know, bringing new people in at that period of time as well, there's no simple way to do those things. But and obviously, I mean, I should say as well, you guys have gone through a bit of a rebrand, haven't you? So can you talk us through that a little bit? Last time I spoke to you, you were Toucan, now you're Touco.
Yeah.
What's the background story on that? Because you've got a bit of form in this, haven't you? Let's be honest.
Oh man. Yeah. Rebranding. We still love Toucans, just, you know, to be clear. It's not anything against Toucans. No, I started this company really in between contracts and thinking that it would be an interesting project to work on. And I gave it the name Toucan as a kind of placeholder way back in the summer of 2018. Because I thought it was a fun name and a bit punny, because 2 people can come together, very punny. And now this year, we kind of have taken that transition from being last year a very focused organisation on the grant that we had managed to get, and the kinds of commitments we needed to do for that grant, to this year going into, okay, now we need to be a scaling business, and that transition has included us going through the Techstars Accelerator at Rise, and it's included us doing all kinds of due diligence that before didn't seem that important, and part of that was the name and the trademarks. And so we just think that to be really, really safe, Toucan was not the name for us. It already exists in other forms, and we support those Toucans. But Touco is a great, new name. We actually really love it. It's taking the bit that we loved about Toucan, which is the kind of 2 people, and then using the co from collaboration, conversation, cooperation, all of these kind of co words that our product is all about. So that's what we've done. It's, I won't lie, been a bit of a nightmare project for me, because it brings back memories of name changes gone by, and I definitely, if I ever have to do a name change again, we'll start off the company with a big name change, name rebrand type project. So yeah, we went through a whole thing of being super creative and what kinds of new particular names, completely different to Toucan, and it's the trademark thing. Like, everything is trademarked. And
I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because especially when you say something and you love that name. I know with us, with a few, I won't go into what the names were, but there's a few banks that we built that actually, there's a name, even now, I love it. I love the name, and I have a logo in my head, and it would be wonderful. But unfortunately, there's an organization in, I think it was France, that had something very, very similar. So that people just get ahead of you on these things, don't they? Which is annoying. But I like Touco. Like I say, the connotations that you've sort of aligned to it. It's always nice when there's a story or some meaning to it, when inevitably somebody like me asks you a question about it. But as you said, the context of, I mean, Carers Week and everything that's happened in lockdown. I mean, your product is more relevant now than ever. More traffic, I guess, in terms of the website and everything that's happening for it over this period?
Yeah, we have. COVID-19, like every single startup, has changed our plans. So we're a B2B2C business, and before lockdown, we had really good discussions with some potential commercial partners, some of which are still ongoing, some of which could shut off because of the lockdown and kind of budget constraints around what we wanted to do. But really what that's forced us to do is we've got creative, we've cut some costs, and we have focused on product development. So I know a lot of startups who are in a similar position. And so we believe that if we can really focus on getting the product up to a really good place by kind of end of this year, we have runway until early next year. So that will put us in good stead. And yeah, we have had some really good inquiries. The issue with kind of particularly these big corporates that we're selling to is that the timeframes are longer than we'd like. But yeah, we're definitely looking for new partners, not only commercial partners as well. Things like we want to partner with a charity in order to help test some of the stuff that we're building. We're looking at partnering with care-focused startups as well to roll out the care card. So that's my job at the moment. I'm trying to coordinate all of that over virtual coffees.
It's always a challenge. Actually, there was a comment over on LinkedIn. So Moshin Ravjan, sorry if I got your name wrong there, from changeahead.org.uk, watching this morning, says, we work with many of the most vulnerable, would love to connect. So happy to kind of connect after that if you're not already. But
Perfect.
It is a interesting time, as you say, like the product is needed more than ever. And actually making that product is a hard thing to do. But I mean, one of the things that you actually say over on your website is that you're experts in designing products with empathy. And I think the emphasis very much on the empathy side of things. I mean, is this something that you think is particularly sort of missing within financial services?
I do. I think every company has a different approach, and Ben Horowitz have just come out with a new book that you've probably read around really trying to find the strategic edge that your company has, and the one that will help you win, the one that isn't just a kind of fluffy thing about your mission or your culture, but actually is something that you really need to make sure is essential to what you do. And I think for us at Touco, it is about empathy, and it's about putting the user at the heart of what we do. Because more than most products, our product has particular issues around potential uses around fraud. It's really about protecting people who are vulnerable already. There are things which we really need to be mindful of as we build and test that product. And so we go the extra mile. Like that's what, if you partner with Touco to do work around vulnerable customers, that's what you're essentially buying. Our kind of expertise at going that extra mile and having that product development cycle that every other startup has, that, you know, we could replicate easily with any other product, but actually adding in this very research focused edge, which is really about listening to people and then feeding that information back into the product development cycle. So yeah, I think we happen to be a group of people who really care about doing that. But I think it's also strategically important for us in order to really create the best product in this particular instance. So yeah, that's how we think about empathy.
Well, it's an interesting one because at that stage, the impact that has so significantly, not just on the product, but actually your recruitment approach, you know, that Venn diagram between who you are and what you do. You know, the closer you can get what you do to really who you are, the happier the people will be, and I think the more productive the culture will be within the organization as well, which I mean probably leads to the way in which you and your team in the future will scale the organization. But I mean your recruitment's been particularly interesting, and this shouldn't be something that stands out, I think, in terms of an organization, but the CEO, the CTO, COO, and head of design are all female. Is that something that was by design, or is it just by coincidence?
Oh, David. First off, I wouldn't presume anyone's gender necessarily
Sure.
by how they present.
Sure.
I think we all do present as female, but I wouldn't speak for the whole team. I think my answer to that is you probably wouldn't ask a male CEO that question. And the reason being is if you were sat in front of a male CEO with a male co-founding team, it's kind of natural, isn't it? Like, you want to start a business with the people that you have got on really well with, and you can trust, and have really good skills.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of natural that you keep in touch with those people in your network, over years and years and years. And sometimes people skew towards keeping in touch with people of their same gender.
Sure.
And not just gender, like generally how they look, and all kinds of different aspects of their identity. So I think the danger in terms of inclusion is always that founders, when they're starting their company, you're very focused on how can I get this thing done, and getting someone who you know and trust on board is the thing that you focus on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. It was never by design, and if anything, it was the opposite of design, because I actually do believe in having a more inclusive founding team, and to me that means having more people from different backgrounds. Having said that, like, we all do bring something different to the table, even though we're four white presenting women presenting. So we all come from slightly different, we come from different countries, we have different approaches to things, we are very opinionated, all of us. So it's not that we don't have any kind of diversity. But yeah, I think I've seen it from the opposite way, because when I was a woman working in predominantly male companies, which I have done pretty much all my career, I always used to think, oh God, these guys at the top, they don't really think about designing their team for inclusion and diversity. And I've kind of made the same mistake, but in the opposite way. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and people often comment about it, but it's a good way to kind of step back and say, what do you really want to design when you're putting that team together?
Yeah.
And what is the way you can do it without losing the ability to be mindful about that inclusion and diversity stuff that's so important.
Well, and I think it's a really interesting point, and I think your answer is exactly the same one I would give, given the flip from starting 11FS. It's an interesting one that when you start a business, it's you're giving life to something, and it's so important to you, and it's so important to the people around you, that you're entrusting working on it with people that you've collected through your career, exactly as you've done. So it is a difficult one, isn't it? I do believe that almost optionality becomes the next stage, because essentially in the early stage it's all about survival. Within that organization, what you're doing is you're trying to bring in the people who you think will increase your chances of the organization kind of being successful. And it's only when you and the times, startups are crazy, right? Startups are the worst gale you can ever think of, in the middle of the sea type scenario. You're doing everything and trying to make all these things happen, and the only thing you really care about is, do you trust the person who you're working with? So it is an interesting one in that. It'll be interesting to see what happens in a year, 2-3 years time, when you guys are killing it, when you've got more time to think about all the other things. Then the world sort of changes a little bit, but it is an interesting dynamic, isn't it?
Well, we've been mindful about the people we hire. So there's now 7 of us. So we've now got, what have we got? 5 women and 2 guys. I shouldn't say guys, men. Or that's at least what I presume of their gender, sorry. And then we've also thought a bit about diversity in that group as well. And I think as we grow, we'll do more of that. So we've really thought about how we can build the team to make sure we're not losing certain opinions. But yeah, I think Peter Thiel talks about how a founding team should be all the same but different to everyone else in the same way. And I think at Touco we are a bit like that. Like, we all have the same mission, and we're all deeply caring about the kind of products we're building. But there's a reason why we're doing this and not working for other people or doing a different type of startup. And so we've come together because of those differences. And so, yeah, I think hopefully that's what makes us a really focused and effective team. So yeah, I don't know, inclusion and diversity, if when you're at this really early stage, I think it's so important to be mindful about it, but it comes with all of these other like big questions that you have to stand back and think about. I remember the guys at Fronted or on Twitter or something were talking about how they're hiring and what they're thinking about, and so even at an early stage, you can be mindful about that and try and hire people to fill in gaps, which I think is important.
I think there's something there about having experience of other startups as well, because I mean, given your experience and given their experience, then actually you've been at places where you've got 4 or 5 years into the journey, and then the people have had to do things to make changes at that stage. Whereas actually, these things are always the same. The earlier you set something on a good course, the better the outcome will be at the end of it. But
100%, yeah. Monzo was the best example of that, I think. When I was there, it was really, really early. There were like 20, 30 of us. And I think they really made an effort to put that culture in from day one. And I don't know what it's like there now, but I guess their success comes a lot from that.
Yeah, I think it's, like you say, I think when you start a startup, you've got to, the people who come in have got to believe in two things. They've got to believe in the thing that they're building and believe in each other. And if you can get those two things right, then actually you'll find people will work really effectively together with that shared vision, regardless of where they are, I guess. But mental health more broadly, I think is something that, you've talked a lot about in the past. Me and you have talked a lot about this in the past. The impact startup life can have on people's mental health is pretty significant. Everybody sort of paints entrepreneurship like some sort of beautiful kind of get up at wait a minute, what was the thing? You get up at 4 a.m. and do 3 hours of yoga, and
you?
It is not, definitely not me. It is definitely not me. But the idea of kind of being more mindful, I think, with mental health for startups is such an important thing, isn't it?
It is, and again, it's not a clear cut. Like the inclusion piece, I think, for early stage startups, it's not clear cut. Inevitably, what you're doing becomes so much a part of your life, and it's hard to have that separation that's really important in another job. But I think, again, it comes back to what kind of culture you can build. And so with us, we put a lot of emphasis on communication and having conversations within the team. Particularly when you want to ask for help. Like for me personally, when I've struggled in jobs or that I've had issues where I've really been stressed out, it's because I felt the kind of pride or the issue of I don't want to be seen to be vulnerable and ask for help. And I think if you can have a culture where it's okay continually to be asking for that help and asking questions. And then we have a kind of unofficial motto in the team, which is have the difficult conversation, which really helps us if we need to sit down with someone and say, I'm not sure what this project was, that you were able to achieve here, or I'm not sure how you're managing at the moment. It seems like you're quite stressed out. But it means that we can at least make sure that the air is always clear. We're not hiding things from each other. And just generally, we started the business because we want to do things our own way. Like we don't want to be the kind of bro culture that you see in some other startups. And our COO, as an example, Emily, she works 4 days a week. She has 2 young kids. It's really important to her to have that time. So she does her hours and she makes sure that she has that time with her kids. We want to have that culture that anyone in the company could have that type of structure. So yeah, we really believe in creating that environment, especially given our mission that caring responsibilities are just as important as what we do in the company. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's something that I myself still struggle with. It's an ongoing thing. Like mental health isn't something that you just get over and leave behind. So I've had massive issues in the past in terms of depressive episodes, and I still see a therapist, and like people can see that in my calendar at work. So I don't mind saying that out loud, and hopefully that encourages everyone in the team to know that they can have a voice if they need to get that help.
I mean, as you grow and as you scale, the tone is set from the CEO. So, I mean, if you're giving people a safe place to have those conversations, then that's the tone that everybody else will pick up and move forward. It's a really interesting one, and I think again, if you're a collection of people who like each other. I always say, I mean, I presume positive intent from everybody at 11FS. And actually, if something has gone awry, it's not because they intended to do it, it's because there is some sort of circumstance or some explanation. So that allows you to actually have a conversation, not about why did you do this thing, but like what's going on, like how can I help? And that changes the dynamic, I think, quite a lot. But it's a really tough one. Like I say, I think there is, similar to sort of D&I conversation, I don't think there is ever any right or wrong answer on I mean, there's probably lots of wrong answers, but there's never any right answer, because circumstances of all of these things are always so specific to an individual. But I think to the point earlier on that you said about your secret sauce when it comes to product creation is empathy. I think the secret sauce for being establishing a great management team is empathy as well. If you can take yourself out of your own shoes and really understand what's going on in somebody else's head, then that's always got to be the best place to actually start a communication, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. I say all the time to the team, like the hardest part of my job is the people stuff. And I'm sure it's the same with you. I absolutely love my job, including the people stuff. But the thing that keeps me up at night more than anything is can't.
It's a challenge, and as you get bigger, those things will get more complex. But that's the exciting part of working for a startup, isn't it? But unfortunately, it's at the top of the hour, so we're probably going to have to let everybody get on with their day. But Bailey, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Where can people find out a little bit more about you and Touco?
Well, thank you for having me. And I am on Twitter. I'm at Bailey Talks, and I really need more followers. Please follow me. And we're also at usetouco.com. That's TOUCO.
Fantastic. All right, guys, that's all we have for you today, but we'll be back tomorrow with Peter Barron, who is the CEO over at TBI Bank. These guys have been doing a really interesting transformation, actually. Their journey's great. The metrics and the setup that they've got for their bank is pretty phenomenal. So we'll get Peter to tell the story tomorrow anyway. All we have for you today. See you same time, same place tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you.